Good evening and welcome to this presentation of predictive analytics to identify veteran groups vulnerable for suicide. My name is NSchock and I'll be narrating this evening. The problem statement for this project involves veteran populations that continue to show higher suicide rates than the general population, and the unequal distribution of government programs and funding based on some assumptions that we have for the reasons for those unequal rates of suicide. Traditionally, assumptions are made that female veterans have a higher suicide rate. Veterans who attempt suicide have a history of substance abuse, PTSD, closed head injuries, whether that's before service or during service, or lack access to jobs and housing. My data source for this project was taken from Kaggle. It was a multi-year study looking at rates reported by state for both civilian and veteran populations. A snippet of one of the years is provided. The years studied in this project are 2005 to 2011. The three research questions that I chose to ask are fundamentally, is the rate of suicide attempts higher for veterans than for civilian populations? That gives me a good baseline as for other questions to build on. The second question is, are female veterans more likely to attempt suicide than males? This will give us an insight on where we need to be focusing resources because the two groups have very different needs and experiences in the military service. And third research question is, what does the data show a decrease or increase in the number of suicides from 2005 to 2011? So are the current programs in place working, or do we need to redirect our resources? So the first step in any project like this is some data pre-processing. So look to combine the data. When it was presented, it was across several spreadsheets. So I did some grouping to look at overall trends by year, by state, to look for any outliers or any missing information. And what was readily apparent is that states are reporting their information differently. There's no standard reporting method. So some states were reporting suicides based on one number. Some were giving a breakdown by gender. Some were providing age-related data, but there was no standardization. So descriptive analytics for an overall average, just to give an idea of what the information was telling me, showed that per state, the mean was 141 veteran deaths. So realizing that it's kind of meaningless to talk about a percentage of a death. When I'm talking about these, I'll be rounding to the nearest whole. The standard error was quite high, nearly 20. Standard deviation of nearly 140 for this. So I took a look at regressions to look at a couple of different things. The overall trend of whether veterans' suicide prevention methods are improving was question number 3. So I wanted to take a look at that. So I plotted the number of suicide attempts across the years, and overall we see that the slope of the line is positive and increasing. The adjusted R is nearly 72% of attempts should fall on this line of regression, so it is a pretty good indicator of future trend. I also did some t-testing to look at the differences between different groups. So in this instance, A t-test for two paired sample means. In this case, the variance is quite different. And we're testing veteran rates versus civilian rates. So we do see a significant difference between these two groups. Finally, clustering. Because of the difference in the way that the numbers were reported, it was very difficult to find meaningful clusters, and that it was very difficult to compare female to men. The numbers comparing age groups was not consistently reported, so I did not find that clustering was a helpful tool at this and for this method. So in conclusion, overall, I was able to reject the null hypothesis, and I did find that there is a significant difference between veteran populations and civilian populations in the rates of suicide. Question number 2 dealt with gender. It was not able to make a conclusion at this time based on the data. Not that there didn't appear to be a significant difference between male and female, I just didn't trust the data that was presented in this particular data group. And I think that's really important for any of us to, when we're working with data, to understand that we can make a call. Their numbers may come out if you push a button, but you really have to make a judgment call on the validity of the numbers and what that data is telling us rather than just presenting a number. And question 3, I was also able to reject the null hypothesis that yes, there is a trend of increasing veteran suicides, and that at this time the preventative measures that we're taking do not appear to be changing that trend to a downward. And here are my references. Thank you for your time this evening, and I enjoyed working with all of you this semester. Thanks.